Let's talk about taste. Is good taste a real, actual thing? Or is it all just, your opinion versus mine? We're going to dive deep into this question using philosopher David Hume's fantastic essay of the standard of taste.
So let's just jump right into it. You've been there, right? You absolutely love a movie, and your best friend thinks it's total garbage. You think a song is pure genius, they can't stand it. So, who's right? Is there even a right answer? Or is beauty just in the eye of the beholder? This is the exact puzzle we're getting into.
You see, we talk about art in two totally different ways. On the one hand, you have your personal feelings. If you say this is my favorite song, hey, nobody can tell you you're wrong. That's your feeling. But then, we make these bigger statements, don't we? We say things like, that movie is objectively bad. Suddenly, it's not just a preference, you're making a judgment call, and that right there is where all the good arguments about art really begin.
Well, our guide for this whole discussion is this guy, David Hume. He was one of the heavy hitters of the Scottish Enlightenment, a philosopher who just loved digging into the messiness of human nature. He saw this exact conflict and decided he was going to try and figure it out.
So Hume frames the whole thing as a paradox. Think about it. If my judgment about what's beautiful is just a feeling happening inside my own mind, how could I possibly ever say that someone else's taste is wrong? It just doesn't seem to make sense, does it?
And at first, Hume seems to agree with the it's all subjective crowd. He flat out says that beauty isn't a property of an object, like its size or its color. Nope, it's a feeling that happens inside our heads when we look at it.
Okay, so if that's true, then it seems like we're done here, right? Case closed. My taste is my taste, yours is yours, and there's no real way to compare them. Every opinion is just as good as any other. But Hume is just getting started, because he then completely flips it on us. He says, look, our common sense tells us that can't be true. He gives this example of two poets from his time, John Milton, who was a literary giant, and some other guy named Ogleby, who was, well, not. Hume basically says anyone who tries to argue that these two are equally talented is just being ridiculous, and we all kind of know that's true.
So this is the big quest. How do we square the circle? How can taste be a subjective feeling, but at the same time, some people's taste is obviously better than others? Hume sets out to find what he calls a standard of taste.
And here's Hume's big aha moment. He argues that even though beauty is a feeling, our feelings aren't totally random. They're a response to certain qualities that are really there in the artwork. So the goal isn't to get rid of our feelings, but to figure out a reliable way to know if our feelings are, well, working correctly.
So how on earth do we do that? Well, Hume's solution is, I think, pretty brilliant. He says, let's stop looking for a rule book that tells us what's good or bad art. Instead, let's look for a certain kind of person, the ideal critic, or as he calls them, the true judge.
And this is really the heart of his whole argument. He says this ideal critic has 5 specific qualities. First up, delicate sentiment, which is basically the ability to notice all the tiny subtle details. Second, they need practice. You get better at judging art the more you do it. Third, comparison. You need to have seen a lot of stuff to know where this one piece fits. Fourth, they have to be free from prejudice, judging the work for what it is, not what you want it to be. And finally, good sense. You got to use your brain to understand how the piece is put together and what it's trying to do.
Now, that first one, delicate sentiment, can sound a little fluffy, right? What does that even mean? Well, Hume, being a great storyteller, doesn't just give us a definition. He tells a fantastic story to show us exactly what he's talking about.
The story comes from the novel Don Quixote, and it's about 2 relatives of a character named Sancho Panza. And these 2 guys were famous in their family for having an incredible talent for tasting wine. So one day they're brought a huge barrel of wine that's supposed to be amazing, and they're asked to give their expert opinion.
The first guy takes a sip. He swirls it around, thinks about it for a minute, and says, "Yup, this wine is excellent, but I'm getting a very, very faint taste of leather." Then the second guy has a taste. He agrees it's great wine, but he also finds a tiny little flaw, a slight hint of iron. Now everyone else standing around just tastes wine. They start laughing at these so-called experts and their wild, contradictory claims.
But here's the punchline. When the barrel was finally drained to the very last drop, what did they find at the bottom? An old iron key tied to a little leather strap. And that is what Hume means by delicate taste. These ideal critics could actually perceive the tiny things that were really there, things that everyone else completely missed.
So let's put it all together. What is the standard of taste, according to Hume?
It's not a checklist or a set of rules. It's all about who is doing the judging and whether their judgment can stand the test of time. So Hume's standard is what he calls the joint verdict of these ideal critics. It's the consensus, the general agreement among all the people out there who actually have those 5 key qualities we talked about.
So let's be super clear. This standard isn't something you can look up in a book. It's a durable consensus that emerges over many, many years, a judgment that gets confirmed again and again by the most qualified people through the ages.
And this explains something really important. Why is Homer's Odyssey still considered a masterpiece almost 3,000 years later? Fashions come and go, entire cultures change, but Hume would argue that truly great art survives because it keeps earning the respect of these true judges, generation after generation. It has passed the ultimate test, the verdict of time.
Okay, so why does any of this matter to you and me here and now? Well, because Hume basically gives us a roadmap for how to become better critics ourselves. Let's look at how we can actually use these ideas.
You can actively train your own taste. The next time you watch a movie or listen to a new album, don't just stop at, did I like it? Ask yourself, why? Practice noticing the little details. Compare it to other things you've seen or heard. Try to figure out what the artist was going for, and be really honest with yourself about your own biases. That is how you start to develop that delicate sentiment.
And that brings us to one last thing to think about. Hume was writing in a time when there was a pretty small group of educated critics. But today, we're drowning in opinions, Rotten Tomatoes scores, YouTube reviews, endless threads on social media. So the question I want to leave you with is this. In our modern world, this sea of endless opinions, can a joint verdict even exist anymore? And if it does, who are the true judges now?